Lu Fan immediately raised his hand to signal everyone, "Wait a moment." His voice was grave. The battle thus far had made one thing crystal clear to him. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, because his attacks were having absolutely no effect on that monster. No matter how powerful an ability he utilized, no matter how lethal his strikes, the result was always the same. Nothing. It was as if all his attacks were utterly futile against that ancient entity. But then the terrifying monster spoke once more. This time, too, its voice did not echo through the air. It descended directly into Lu Fan's mind. "Oh, human! What is the matter? All your efforts are in vain." A glint of mockery flashed within its countless eyes. Then, in a low yet incredibly chilling voice, it spoke. "You cannot kill me!" Upon hearing this, Lu Fan's eyes narrowed. But now, he did not panic. Instead, his mind began to race even faster than before. He realized he would have to find another way. For this was no ordinary battle. He began to rapidly analyze the situation within his mind. If I keep striking it, it simply comes back to life. And if I attempt to destroy it repeatedly, it would take an eternity to deplete its full power. But long before that happens, it would have already regenerated to full strength once again. It was an endless cycle, an enemy that seemed to exist beyond the very laws of death. At that moment, the monster fixed its gaze upon Lu Fan once more. Its myriad eyes lit up in unison. Then it laughed mockingly. "Oh, human, listen, I have all the time in the world." There was absolute confidence in his voice, as if he harbored not the slightest doubt about his victory. Then, spreading his massive arms wide, he declared, "And the day I reach full maturity, that day your death will be sealed." Suddenly, the atmosphere all around grew even heavier. The monster's aura was intensifying continuously. And then he uttered his final words in which a clear threat lay hidden. "No one will be able to save you from me." Upon hearing this, silence fell over the entire area for a few moments. But Lu Fan stood motionless. His gaze remained fixed upon the monster. At that very instant, Lu Fan's gaze suddenly locked onto that glass sphere, that very sphere inside which he had previously been imprisoned. Upon seeing it, Lu Fan froze completely for a moment. A sudden spark of realization lit up in his eyes, as if all the scattered pieces had suddenly fallen into place in a single instant. And then he finally understood everything. This was it. This was its true weakness. A faint smile appeared on his face. At long last, he had uncovered his enemy's secret. Without wasting a moment, Lu Fan immediately drew his bow and arrow. Then, looking directly at the ancient demon, he issued a challenge. "I've figured out your trick." There was not a shred of doubt in his voice now, only absolute confidence. Then, glaring at the creature with cold eyes, he declared, "Now, there is no escape for you." Upon hearing this, the colossal demon stood completely stunned for a moment. Then a glint of mockery flashed in its countless eyes. It laughed sarcastically and spoke, "Ha! Just because you figured something out, you're displaying such arrogance? Human, you think far too highly of yourself." But Lu Fan paid absolutely no heed to its words. Without a moment's hesitation, he released his arrow. Whoosh! The arrow tore through the air with the speed of lightning. The very next instant, crash! The arrow struck the crystal sphere dead on, and then the entire crystal shattered into countless fragments. The moment the crystal broke, the entire atmosphere shifted. The heavy pressure in the air suddenly dissipated, but the very next moment, terrifying, tempestuous winds began to rage in every direction. Countless lights began to flash across the sky. It was as if the entire region were shattering apart. Thick green smoke began to spread in every direction. The entire ancient temple shuddered, and then the expression on the monster's face changed. For the first time, panic was clearly visible in its eyes. As the crystal shattered, it was as if all its hopes had crumbled in a single instant. It stared in disbelief at the shattered remains. Then suddenly, its terrifying voice rang out, filled with both rage and panic. "Lu Fan! What have you done?" Its countless eyes widened wildly, like those of a madman. Then, in a voice trembling with fury, it screamed, You have ruined my resurrection plan. You have completely destroyed centuries of my preparations." In that moment, Lu Fan was finally convinced. His conjecture had been correct. That crystal sphere was no ordinary object. It was the very core of this ancient deity's resurrection. The moment the crystal sphere shattered and scattered, the monster realized it instantly. The very power upon which its life depended. The very force that allowed it to rise again and again even after death. That very power had now been completely annihilated. For a few brief moments, the entire area was plunged into silence. But in the very next instant, the monster erupted in a paroxysm of rage. Its countless eyes began to glow a blood-red hue. Its massive tentacles thrashed wildly in the air like a mad thing. Then it let out a roar that shook the entire ancient ruin to its foundations. "Ah!" Its voice resounded directly within Lu Fan's mind like an explosion. "You destroyed the very means, the very power, through which I could unleash my true strength." Its voice trembled with fury and hatred. Then it roared even louder. "You didn't just ruin my plans, you stripped away my entire existence." A terrifying energy began to surge all around. The green mist grew even thicker. The monster's aura began to expand uncontrollably. Then, glaring at Lu Fan with its myriad eyes, it thundered, "I will show you no mercy whatsoever, human. You will pay a price for this, one you cannot even begin to imagine." Yet, amidst this terrifying rage, Lu Fan stood calm and unperturbed. His dragons were by his side. His gaze was cold, and there was not a trace of fear on his face. Then he slowly took a step forward and spoke in a cold, measured voice. "If you possess the power to kill me all along, then why did you need to hide behind that crystal?" A sharp glint flashed in his eyes. He understood it completely now. This so-called abyssal ancient god was not quite as invincible as he was trying to appear. Staring at him unblinkingly, Lu Fan spoke. "You relied on tricks, deception, illusions, and resurrection ploys. That only proves you are not as powerful as you claim to be." His words struck the monster's ego like a piercing arrow. Then, gripping his weapon firmly, he delivered his final declaration. "I will not give you the chance to assume your true form." His voice had turned utterly cold. "Before that happens, I will finish you off, right here." Upon hearing this, all of Lu Fan's dragons surged forward in unison. No one had any intention of holding back now. One after another, every dragon began to unleash its terrifying power. Fire, lightning, destructive energy, countless forces erupted simultaneously. The entire region trembled. In the very next instant, they all descended upon that abyssal ancient god together. Witnessing this, the monster finally grasped the truth. In its countless eyes, for the very first time, despair appeared. It had realized its end was no longer far off. Now it would not escape. In its final moments, it roared like a madman. Its voice did not merely echo across the region, it resounded directly within Lu Fan's mind. "I will trap your soul within my snare. I will ensure that you spend the rest of your life in unbearable agony." Its voice was dripping with venom. Then it roared even louder. "You will have no escape." But at that very moment, snap, Lu Fan snapped his fingers. His expression remained perfectly calm. Then, in a grave tone, he replied, "Yes, that is true. Ancient gods are immortal. They are not easily destroyed completely." As he spoke, a cold glint flickered in his eyes. Then he continued, "But perhaps in the next generation, you might be able to pull off such a miracle." His voice suddenly turned hard. "In this life, you cannot kill me!" And in that instant, all of his dragons unleashed their attacks simultaneously. Boom! The entire ancient temple was engulfed in violent energy. Flames soared toward the heavens. Lightning crackled and roared. Destructive forces erupted simultaneously. In the face of that ferocious assault, the monster stood no chance. In a mere few seconds, its massive body began to burn. Its tentacles started to snap. Its countless eyes began to burst one by one. Its body began to disintegrate. Then, crash! Its very existence seemed to shatter from within. Every single part of its body turned to ash, scattering into the wind. Its terrifying limbs vanished. Its colossal eyes tore free from their sockets, dissolving into the air. In just a few moments, the ancient deity, once a symbol of terror, had been reduced to nothing but ash, smoke, and scattered energy. But as its final energies dissolved into the air, the entire region was plunged into an eerie silence, as if A truly ancient entity had just met its demise. Just as was typically the case whenever Lu Fan defeated a powerful demon, the exact same scenario unfolded this time around. On this occasion, he obtained an item of ancient deity origin quality, a discovery that filled Lu Fan with immense delight. And as expected, much like the divine bone before it, this artifact too bore traces of an ancient divine essence. Lu Fan immediately took the object into his hands. However, he soon realized that this particular ancient deity artifact was not merely a fundamental essence imbued with the power of an ancient deity, rather it represented something far more magnificent. In truth, it was the ancient deity ticket, the very means through which one could vie for the title of deity during the Great Tribulation.